Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm back from vacation, the holidays, and it's happy to be here. I'm excited to talk to you about this video in particular because we're going to go through all of the games that were released in 2022 that we at SideGame played. So I'm excited to go through all of these. This was actually brought to my attention by a viewer, and it sounded like a really cool idea. So I decided to feature it here on the channel, and let's get into it. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about all of the games that came out in 2022 that I played. Now, before we begin, I do want to quickly show you how to actually access this on Board Game Geek. It's a pretty cool feature, and I think it's something that you can take a look at as well. And if you don't know how to do this, it's pretty awesome and pretty easy. This is going to be the list that you'll generate when you're finished, but it's actually up here in the search bar. So you go in the search and you'll hit the advanced search button, and this is going to bring you to this giant way that you can customize and filter the different games that you've played on here. So you can click in the year released range, and so we want to talk about all the 2022 games. We're going to go into here, 2022 to 2022, and then we're going to go to rated specifically. Now, there are some games that were released in 2022 that I own currently because we got like 10 shipments in while I was gone. So things like Hoplomachus Victorum, the Woodcraft game, War of the Ring, the card game. I just haven't had opportunities to play these yet because we came in last night. So I want to say that, yes, those are here, and maybe we can look at them at the end of this video. But for right now, we're just going to look at the rated games. So you'll click on rated, year release, 2022, and then we'll hit submit. And that's going to generate it based on your own Board Game Geek account. Now, please feel free to leave comments about any of these games that we talk about here. And we're going to go through some broad overviews. We're going to look at their current rank, my rating of the game, and I think that's really all that we need. We'll keep the average rating and the geek rating, but we're not going to do any huge overviews or details or ranking. We have a series of 2022 list videos. You can take a look there for my thoughts and my rankings in specific tiers, but I think that the number rating here will give you a good overview of my general thoughts on the game. So we'll start off with Oathsworn into the Deepwood. This is a ranked 8 out of 10 game for me, and so far I am loving this campaign. Now, there are some challenges that you'll face that I think are a little less well done than others, and I think that's why it's prevented it from getting to that 9 or 10 rating, but overall, this is an excellent experience. Now, my favorite part about this game has to be the dice system. I love how easy it is to roll them, check your successes, and feels gratifying the whole time. Every single skill test is an actual skill test, a choice that you're going to think about and feel awesome, whether or not you pass it greatly or you just barely get it. It's such an awesome feeling. But my least favorite thing about this actually has to do with the story portion. There's a couple of story portions that require you, I don't want to do any spoilers here, but there's some story portions that use components that I personally dislike extremely, and it seems like it's going to be a recurring thing, and it's kind of unfortunate because it's like, I didn't like that at all, and the way that the app handled it wasn't something I enjoyed, and it was a pretty dampening experience for me. It's like a form of exploration. I don't want to get into any spoilers, but there was this story portion that was a form of exploration that I extremely disliked, and it put me off of it a little bit, and it was followed up by a pretty subpar experience in the encounter phase, and I thought that was really unfortunate because I was having an awesome time with like the first 3 stories and encounter pairs, and then that 4th story just put me down so bad. So I wasn't a huge fan that there are some highs and some lows in this. Also, some of the enemies don't feel that exciting. So that's something to be aware of with Oathsworn, is not all of them are going to knock it out of the park, but the overall experience is a lot of fun. So that's Oathsworn into the Deepwood, the first one we're covering. Next up is ISS Vanguard. Now, this one is a 7. It didn't quite reach the lengths of some of the other campaigns that made it this year because it feels like the game is in almost a perpetual state of management and setup with the shipbook phase, which is fun to a point where you're putting different things in like conveyor belts to upgrade, and the ship management is cool and it makes sense and is a unique take on this binder system. But I do a lot of organizing for SideGame Library, and so a lot of the times it feels like I'm just constantly setting up the game, and that's a feeling that it's cool in some aspects, but it's not a feeling that I super enjoy. I like the exploration portion of the game where you're actually on the planet interacting. They've got some cool narration and the app works well, but when you get back to that shipbook, it's like, okay, I got to follow this flow chart flowchart, and it feels like I'm setting up for like an hour before I can play again and start the next mission. But that is something to be aware of with the game in general. That might be something you really enjoy, but I find it a bit tedious at times, and it feels like I'm just reading rules more often than I should in a game that I've been playing for hours and hours. So that is ISS Vanguard. Still an awesome game. I enjoy that gameplay so much, but the ship book is, I think, what's bringing it down a little bit for me. Next up is Endless Winter Paleo Americans, an awesome game where you have this cool combination of deck building, worker placement, where your cards bolster your actions or can set you up for like end of round scoring. And Paleo Americans in particular, I think, is best with expansions. I think the core game is not enough, but I think that the expansions are a lot of fun. My favorite one's the Cave Painting expansion, and I also love there's a deck of these extra beast cards that can replace the ones in the original game. In the original game, the beast cards were just a form of endgame scoring, or you could tap them for immediate resources, but the expansion beasts allow you to generate additional resources during every eclipse, which give you different venues for passive income, which is awesome, because I think that's one of the flaws in that core game is you need to get some form of passive income or you're going to get left behind so badly. And that's one of my least favorite things about the game is this set path almost, but also the freedom to not really get blocked on anything. It's such a strange phenomenon because there's only 4 worker placement spots in the game and no one really blocks you. You can pretty much do whatever you want. It's the worker placement in this is first come, first serve on these minor bonuses. And after that, there's no real blocking or hardcore interaction on that main game board. The blocking interaction comes from the building of tents. So there are these tents that are going to be out on the board that can block these resource generation spots. And those are so critical in the main game that a bad placement of them early, and if you are placing them last of your last in turn order, you can do some nasty plays where you can just put out these tents on the opponent's tents to make sure that you are basically blocking them from getting their resource generation, and it can set certain players back dramatically. And so I like the expansions that add different facets of that resource generation because it's not just on that main game board with the tents. So that's something to be aware of with this one. My favorite part about this game, though, I love the action card system. I think it's a lot of fun too, that every card is super important because you have to use it to bolster your actions, and you only get 12 actions the entire game. So you're trying to manage those cards in a way that's not only logical, but it's going to push you forward from round to round. And there's also that tension of, do I actually keep some of these to bolster myself at the end of round scoring during the eclipse phase, because that can put you in a situation that will set you up for even more bonuses in the next season. So there's some good choices there, but I do recommend this one with expansions, particularly the Cave Painting and Ancestors expansions for that extra beast deck, as well as the 5th action space that's unlocked with Cave Paintings. Next up is Wonderland's War. This is a 9 rating. This has some of my favorite things going on in it. This is a combat-centric game where you are going to be in one half getting resources and bonuses, and then in the second half, you're going to be getting to use those bonuses immediately. Gratifying experience, and that's probably my favorite part about this game, is the fact that you are getting powers and abilities in a fun way with the tea party. And then my least favorite part about this game, it's a hard one to find out. I don't know if there's anything that I can think of right now that I super dislike about this game. Yeah, we'll have to come back to this one. Wonderland's War pretty good. I like this game quite a bit. It works at pretty much all player counts. I was so surprised at the 2-player game of Wonderland's War. I think I might prefer it to the large one, but the large one's awesome because you have multiple people in the battles. There's some good stuff in Wonderland's War. I love this game. This game's awesome. Next up is Dead Reckoning. Dead Reckoning is a card crafting game that suffers from this action paralysis on your turn because it's so freeform. But the game itself is a lot of fun when you're actually playing it. I prefer this one at 2 and 3. And the interaction between the players is a lot of fun with going to pirate mode and then actually racing towards specific spots and maps. The area control is interesting. The battle system, it uses a cube tower, but honestly, it's more like a dice. If you're thinking about it, it's like dice in an arena because it's like a 20-sided die, and some of the faces are more oftenly rolled. So I guess it's more like a 40-sided die with multiple faces, but you can knock the dice out. So it's cool. It's like an interesting mix of something like the strike dice system where you're throwing stuff, because there's some effects that let you like drop cubes later. It's super interesting. I like this one a lot. I think the card crafting is really well done, particularly because you're doing the upgrades on other people's turns. So there is overlap on that. So it does curb that experience of feeling the downtime. But the downtime is the thing that's keeping this one from getting to that 8, 9, 10. And I don't think that the solo mode has the interaction that I want in the 2-3 player game, because the solo mode is just kind of this ship that's moving around. Yeah, this is Ship Schooner. It's been a while since I played the solo mode here, but the board is completely open. You have pretty much full reign of it, so I don't find the tension or the race factor that's present in the multiplayer game. My favorite part of this game, though, is that card crafting system. I love the fact that every round you get to upgrade something, and you're also constantly pulling these upgrades into your hand. And you can even hold on to the same card, and just in the first 3 turns, just boom, 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 upgrade this single card, and all of a sudden you have one super awesome card that you get to use for the rest of the game, and it feels so good when you do so. There are some characters that, just like a normal crew, you could upgrade that super far because it's going to generate you the resources, and you can actually put them straight on your boat once it's super high up. It's incredible. So you can take one of the dumbest characters in the game, or like should be the weakest character, and it actually is a viable strategy. So I love that about Dead Reckoning, that there's so many different strategies. So that is Dead Reckoning, a 7 out of 10 for me. Biggest detriment there is that downtime and just the openness of the actions. There's just so much that you can do that it's often paralyzing, and I don't think the solo mode is particularly strong. Nemesis Lockdown, I rate lower than the original Nemesis, but it is still an awesome game. This adds a lot of small, minor rules, and if you thought the original Nemesis had those, this one has them in spades more. This one's a lot harder, in my opinion. With the aliens, there's a lot of pressure from the players to work together. So if somebody does not work as part of a team, it can make the entire experience collapse. Finally got my first win of this during Nemesis this year. We do a big group gathering where we do some holiday celebrations and play Nemesis. And finally, we had 2 people win this game. It's been a whole year since its release, and got one in. The characters in this game are very strong because their decks actually have these specific action cards that are pretty busted compared to the original Nemesis. So it feels awesome to play these characters. That being said, the game also has ramped up difficulty. It has more loss conditions, more punishing enemies, so they actually chase you when you escape from them. There are more ways to just suddenly die, and there's even this extra check at the end of the game. If you don't complete a hidden objective at the end, then you can just die for this absurd reason. And it's so interesting because you can talk to the other players and try to get them to tell you what their little endgame scoring tile is, or you can talk to them and say, hey, what is this, or try to get more info as you play through interacting with the map. But that's all going to take time that is so precious to you that you need to be putting on towards your other objectives. There's a lot to do here, and I think that the reason I enjoy the original more than Lockdown is because the original has so much openness that you can do whatever you want. Every strategy is viable, and it's not really telling if somebody decides to do their own thing. It's sort of the entire experience is a little bit more nebulous. You're not sure what's going on, and I think that adds to the fear and the thematics, honestly. But in the Nemesis Lockdown, there's honestly 2 paths. It feels like there's you need to work together because the enemies are so hard and the characters are so strong. So that's one thing that you should be doing to actually survive and potentially even get through those many small objectives at the end, because you have just so many things you have to do. But then the other thing is you can just totally sabotage. And as soon as one person sabotages, pretty much no one's going to win Nemesis Lockdown. Somebody sabotages, and if they can escape, awesome. But it's a lot harder to escape, in particular with those extra endgame criteria. It makes it even more difficult. So I think that there's a lot more freedom in the negotiation and betrayal aspects in the original, but I still think that Lockdown is awesome. Favorite thing Lockdown is the characters. I love how unique they are and their different action decks. Least favorite thing is that force down that specific path. Next up is Massive Darkness 2 Hellscape. This one is awesome. I enjoyed the entire experience on this one. It's a dungeon crawl game. You move around, and you'll be using your own special characters that are unique. They are asymmetric in their core, which is awesome. The way that they upgrade, the way that they feel when you attack and battle, and the way that they modify everything. I was playing a Berserker the other day where they're taking damage, and they can use their health counters to do additional things. That was a lot of fun. I love the way that the upgrades link into that asymmetry as well, but the core is so solid. Talked about this game a lot, so I'll try not to go too down on these games that have been featured on the channel, but this one is awesome. You need to give it a try. My favorite part of this game is that asymmetry. I think it's what's done so well because the core is so good. It reminds me a lot of something like Root, where the core game is so solid that you could do whatever you want with the asymmetric factions. Least favorite thing about this game are the mobs, actually. There's a lot of randomness in the dungeon. You can totally ignore this if you don't care about the miniatures, but you'll be spawning these characters whenever you go into like rooms. You open the door down, you see what's in there, and the characters have like 3 or 4 miniatures that you need to spawn for them based on the player count that you're playing. And so you need to go into like because there's a lot of content for this. So you'll be finding like a specific spot for the miniatures and you pull them out and then you have this giant board and every single time you fight an enemy, you're bringing more and more out. And so your gaming space will get cluttered because there's so much enemy variety. You can totally just make it so you're only using like a cycle of 3 or 4 miniatures. So if you're worried about that setup, it's something you can do. But if you're trying to be pulled in and use those thematics, that can be a little bit annoying to fight those miniatures. But that's a pretty minor bug for me. I think overall the gameplay is so engaging and you're always playing. It feels so good. God, what a great game. Next up, Merchants of the Dark Road. This one was one of my disappointments from this year. Got it very early. One of the most beautiful games I've seen. I love the metal coins in this. They are the coolest. They remind me of Star Wars because they all have these unique currency shapes and pieces. But the game itself was a little weak. It's a not pick up and deliver. It's a contract fulfillment game. You're going to gain resources that go into your own little caravan. And the game was very cyclical. You did this thing to do this thing, and which doesn't help that it's on a rondelle, so it's literally cyclical on top of this cyclical gameplay loop, and it honestly was just not super engaging. The variability in the game was not there, and the overall core gameplay loop of getting resources, trading them in, was a little tired. One of the expansions added a new way of scoring with the contracts, but it was just a small variation on more of the same contract fulfillment. And it just wasn't something that I was excited to play again. It was also pretty fiddly on the turn structure and had downtime, which was insane because the game looked like it was so simple. And the game, honestly, the gameplay is so simple, but still retains that downtime with the way that you're like sequencing your actions with this dice movement. So not one that I can recommend, but I think some people do like it. I think a lot of people are taken in by the art and the theming, which is cool, but not one for me. Favorite thing about that game, though, is there's a way that you can jump into other players' actions when they're doing a sell action, which is a weird thing that can happen because people might just not sell because they don't want to give you action economy by allowing you to sell with them. It's a weird position that it puts you in, but it can lead to like either somebody clearly just getting benefits and going forward, or it can also lead to like a stalemate almost. It's a weird situation. Not a big fan of Merchants of the Dark Road, unfortunately. Next up is My Father's Work. This is also one did not get gripped by. It had you playing as his family, and you were going through your lifetime, and every so often you would have to reset your basically all your resources except for like these tracks that you had gone up with. And that's a cool mechanism. I love that. You have to do the best with what you have right now, which is a lot of fun. And the gameplay itself is very simple. It's a small worker placement game. You have different workers at different bases that can go in different areas of the board. Some that work on your own private one, some that work on the main game board. And most of the actions are like gain a resource or do a small thing. And then the other actions on your board are like fulfill this card in your hand. It's another simple contract fulfillment game at its heart, but it's interrupted by this story that I don't think is particularly strong. You have a scenario-based game that is going to give you these events that will happen, and they are long. They make the game take about 3 hours, and it's not something I'm super excited to play when you're doing something so simple, and then you have to sit and wait for like 10 minutes. Well, that's probably hyperbole. It's probably like 5 minutes, which is still a long time. You sit and wait for 5 minutes between rounds as there's like this setup that's involved with the event, and you're doing these small tokens, and I think that the events are a little bit on the minor side. That being said, my favorite part about this game, though, is the spiral book. It has a book that changes as the story goes, which opens up new spots, and based on certain decisions, certain things may come out. And so you'll flip the book to the specific page that you need. Yeah, my least favorite part, though, is honestly just how long of an experience it is and how interrupted it is, and just the flow is not there, which is wild because of how simple of a game it really is. So that's My Father's Work. Yeah, we'll move on to the next one. Heat Pedal to the Metal I've enjoyed a lot. This one's super fun with the sensation that you get as you're feeling like a racer. You'll be in the seat of a car, you're managing this small little deck of cards, and you're revealing cards based on your speed. So it's one thing I enjoy is you'll have your stick shift, you'll be going up into higher gears, and the higher the gear you are, that's the amount of cards that you play. And so the whole game really comes into where you're taking the corners. So these corners have a restriction on how fast you can go around them. And every time you do bank a corner, you take heat is the difference between how fast you're going and the corner's limit. And so that's the real game is right there, is trying to figure out how you're going to hit the corner, if you want to hit multiple corners in the same turn, to actually conserve your actions and conserve your speed so you can race to the finish line. And it is a cool sensation. It makes you feel like a racer, which is super fun. And you sit there and you like gear up and you're like, yeah, play 4 cards. I feel like you're going fast, and it feels cool. That being said, it's not on the high end for me, because I do think that while there is a lot of replayability in the box, a lot of the replayability feels the same. It has these minor tweaks that, yes, they're going to add some small variations to your gameplay and your decisions, but I don't think it's necessarily there. Particularly with the boards and the weather, there are some cards that will like make it so the numbers a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller, but that's not super exciting to me. I think that the game needs more in that deck variety. One thing that they do have that adds to the deck variety are these, I think it's called the body shop. I forget exactly what it's called. The garage. You're going to get 3 special cards for you that you'll draft at the beginning of the game. And that's my favorite part about this game, for sure. You get to get these 3 unique cards that go into your deck, and they give you some form of special ability. Now, they're the same recurring icons that are on all the other cards, basically. So they're things like getting your cooldown, so putting more heat back in, which allows you to continue to take risky plays on those corners and shifting up and down. There are some that allow you to stack them back on top of the deck, that you can switch between the numbers. I think that that is my favorite part, for sure, because you're planning ahead. It's like that drafting, right? Getting powers and abilities and then using them immediately. My favorite thing to do. But I think that it is, I would like more of that, more unique cards. I'd like my entire deck to be weird and funky, as opposed to having, I think there's like 15 of the same identical cards in every single car, and then your 3 special ones. Yes, you're burning through those cards a lot. You have like 7-hand size, so you're going to be seeing those special cards quite a bit, which is cool because you get to use them. But I wish that there was more customization like that, as opposed to these minor adjustments on the board. So that's Heat, Pedal to the Metal. Still a lot of fun. If you like racing games, you're going to enjoy this one. Solo mode is easy to use and play. I don't think it's one that I'll return to, though, because it does have that same sensation and feeling as that multiplayer, and I think I'll reserve that for those multiplayer games. That's Heat, Pedal to the Metal. John Company 2nd Edition. It's actually, I think, my lowest rated game of the year, which is so sad because I think this game is awesome. You can go check out the big whole long video on it where I go into detail, but just to summarize, it's because of the solo mode. I learned this game, and it is probably the heaviest game I learned all year. Learned this game, was excited to play. It looked so interesting with all the different systems interconnecting, and I was like, okay, let's do the solo mode, and it is so much work, and not in a good way. It's basically, you have an entire book that dictates the actions that the solo player is taking, and it's basically a huge flow chart, and you're just going down the line, not engaging, not exciting. There are points where you can interact, but because of the randomness of the game, you can have on the first turn the ability to lose potentially half your actions, which is terrible. When the game is taking like 9/10 of the actions and you're only taking 1/10, it feels like you're just doing, it's that same thing with ISS Vanguard, that perpetual setup. And that's what it feels like. I'm not getting to play this game that I just spent so long to learn. It was so frustrating. And played it a second time solo. Same thing happened. I was like, what is happening? Why would anyone return to this solo? It was it was a terrible experience. I didn't like it at all. It's also prevented me from wanting to teach it to other people, because normally I learn these super heavy games in the solo capacity so I can understand all the systems and then do the rolling teach and get people into the game and start playing. But John Company's not one I want to return to in that solo aspect. It's a bit frustrating. So I don't know if this one's going to stay in the library. Maybe I'll prioritize getting a group of competitive players to play it. But it's gonna be a hard one to push with a weight rating of this high. So that's John Company's 2nd Edition. On the exact flip side, my favorite game of the year, this is Blood on Clocktower, my new favorite game of all time. We're actually going to be doing a playthrough, not a playthrough. We're doing a play on Discord here in a little bit today, which is exciting. We'll get to play hopefully with Corinne from Super Blonde Nerd. She's feeling a little under the weather right now, so hopefully she feels better. But this is the best game, I think, and it's wild because it's kind of consumed me. It's something that I will watch people play. It's something that I hear about. It's something that I'll create things for, which is insane. I don't have games like this, which is awesome that there's something that I enjoy so much. And it has to do with just the player-driven agency and the player-driven puzzle solving. There's a script of characters. You could be going through that script and trying to figure out what the situation and scenario is, and you'll interact with people to see what sort of worldviews can line up. There's misinformation galore in this game, though, with the drunk and poison mechanism, so you're never sure who's actually telling the truth, but you can use a form of deduction where you're able to track back information to cancel out possible worldviews. I love that so much because, yes, there is misinformation, and yes, you're not sure what you can trust, but because there's so much information coming from different points, you can coordinate and corroborate this different information to figure out what the actual situation is. It's a lovely situation to find yourself in as you figure things out, and I love the entire social aspect of it. There's also all these powers and abilities that are super fun. Talked about this ad nauseum. It's so awesome. If you haven't played it, join us. We have, I think, a couple of spaces left on our live stream here. Not our live stream, our Discord game. So if you're interested, go check that comment on the channel. You can put a comment here. I'll put a link to it. afterwards if you're interested. But wow, what an awesome game. I love this one. Super Fantasy Brawl. I'm not going to talk much about this because this came out in like 2020, but it's an awesome game. Amazing skirmish game. Have so much fun with this one. With the team composition, the deck itself, you're going to have these 18 cards, 6 from each different hero that you play as. You'll be going head to head. The objective system pushes it through. Wow. What an awesome game. So Super Fantasy Brawl's characters, I think, are what makes it shine. They're unique and interesting while being thematic with only 6 cards, which I love. There's a lot of thought and care taken with that. And Simon just acquired this game, which, I hope means we get a bunch of expansions. Because I love this game. It's so awesome. My least favorite part about this game is maybe potential downtime. There are reaction cards that you can play on other people's turns, but I think when somebody is first learning this game, they can get a little bit of AP because there's no randomness in this game. So maybe they're thinking a little bit too long on their turns, and that can happen with players who are just starting out. Have experienced that a little bit, but most of the time it's a pretty smooth experience. So I think this one's pretty awesome, though. If you like skirmish games, give this one a try. Got to play a lot this year, and Super Fantasy Brawl still holds up. It's amazing. Next up is Mosaic, Story of Civilization. This is another one that I'm enjoying. This has a simple action system of either gain resources or spend resources to gain cards. And most of the cards are going to give you more resource production, symbols to claim these milestone bonuses, or place pieces on the board for area control. It's awesome. I like this game a lot. It's easy to play and it's fun to play. You're getting constant abilities and powers. My favorite part about this game is I like the cards. I love all the cards. They're so different, interesting, and a lot of them are going to just give you these small incremental bonuses, and in a standard Civilization style feeling, it'll feel amazing when you finally cash in and take a resource generation turn and just get showered in resources. You're going to make like 15 or 20 resources in the late game and just be like, oh my gosh, I have so many things I don't know what to do with them. It's a great feeling. The only reason it's kind of in the 8 range instead of higher is because of the lower player counts and the time that it can take. And sometimes that is a little bit annoying because you'll get to certain points of the game where it feels like you're just doing the same thing because some of the cards will show up and you're just kind of going through this cycle and motions. And that's particularly in the lower player count games because there's so much time because of the way the end game trigger happens. The game ends when either 2 of like the sets of milestones or end game objectives are emptied, or it's ended when these scoring cards show up. And 2 of the scoring cards are a little bit harder to get to than others, and so they're not going to come out as frequently, so the game can get extended dramatically, which is insane. The other way that the game ends is through those objectives, and yes, everybody's reaching for them, but there's generally like 1 or 2 that maybe be a little bit harder and you have to hardcore specialize in, and a lot of times those get ignored, and so they're not as frequently taken. It's a strange dynamic where, yes, it feels so good to take these small minor actions, and it feels great for like the whole time. But if you do that too much, it's a little bit too much. You're like, okay, when is this actually going to end? Because at this point, I feel like I'm just treading water. I'm just doing this thing to do this thing. Strange phenomenon. I'm curious if the expansion maybe will change that. Maybe add a 3rd end game condition. We'll see. But I do enjoy this one. It is one that I enjoy at least 4 players, and then 5 players is also a great player count. Next up is Tiletum, another one I've enjoyed. This is awesome. This barely missed the top 10 of the year, actually. This one is a Euro game where you are going to be drafting dice, and the dice system here is so simple. You take the number of resources that are depicted on the dice, and based on the color of the die. So if I take like a 5 yellow, I would get 5 food. Sorry, not yellow, pink. 5 pink, I would get 5 food. And then the opposite side of the die is how strong you take the action where you drafted the die from. Super simple system. And then the actions are also extremely simple. You're going to be moving around this map with your 2 different pieces. You can build pillars, and you can build these little houses that will set you up for different types of scoring. You have these cathedral pieces that are first come, first serve. So there's always this race on the map. So every die has importance and value. And then there's also these little tiny objectives that you're filling in the form of like you have this house that's full of these different objective markers that you'll be putting on, and you get rewards constantly, lots of bonuses. I love that sensation. It gives me a feeling of something like Castles of Burgundy, where you are constantly getting things and playing them and using their effects and getting little tiny bonus actions. There's even this action marker system where you might generate like 10 actions at a turn, so you have these little markers to track so you don't get lost in the amount of bonuses you're taking. It somehow manages to have that sensation of just constantly getting stuff, but also not have that AP featured, because a lot of the actions are logical and they make sense, but it does offer you with interesting tactical choices where you're like, ooh, based on that thing that just came out, maybe I go here. And on the dice rolls at the beginning with that input randomness where you're like, okay, what can I do with this new dice set to further my strategy? A lot of fun. I enjoyed this one a lot. That's Tiletum. Next up, Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. This one I think is an awesome kids and family game, particularly with the middle school students that I've worked with. This has you playing simultaneous reveal turns, where everybody's going to be putting a card down, revealing them, and then basically going in the order of like the strength of the card, just doing an action. So there's only really one choice at the beginning, and that's picking that card, and you just see how it goes. So not as much as I would like, and a lot of those choices are pretty straightforward. You're like, okay, obviously I'm going to take this one because it's the best for me. There are some moments where you'll have some take that cards, and it can feel pretty bad just based on the way it orders, where your only choice can be to take like from the person who's losing. So it feels even worse for them. But I think that this is awesome for that family setting because it's so low barrier to entry. It's so easy to get started. You have 6 cards that you get from like the first round. Everybody plays one, you reveal it, and just see what happens. And then as soon as a choice comes up, you say, hey, what do you want to do? You do that, and it just goes along nicely. So this is one that I enjoy for that teaching factor, but for gripping gameplay decisions, it's probably not one that I'm going to recommend. But it is a fun game, cool production. I like the pirate theme. It reminds me of like Treasure Planet with all these anthropomorphic pirates. It's a cool one. So that's Libertalia Winds of Galecrest. Next is Twilight Inscription, another one I've enjoyed quite a bit. This is one that people have not wanted to play, though, in the competitive setting, which is hilarious. So this is a Twilight Inscription themed roll and write board game. I think the solo mode is awesome. It's a 7 for me because of the variability, and the factions are going to keep you coming back. But believe it or not, I think even with that variability of the factions, the gameplay can feel a little similar to what you're doing each round as you're traveling from the different boards, but it is satisfying to play, which I think makes it still something that you're going to want to come back to. I'm curious to see what the multiplayer will be like with the voting patterns. There's a voting system that is going to give everybody bonuses or negatives. There's also the different races for these objectives. So also curious to see how that plays out in that multiplayer experience. The expert mode of the solo is a lot of fun, though. You're constantly having to pick and choose between the different objectives you're chasing for because it's pretty fast at what it does. And so you can't do everything. Well, you can. There's definitely factions that are better than others. And so if you are that specific faction, you can definitely keep up, but it is a challenge, and I think it's a lot of fun. So the solo mode is really well done, but I want to play this one more in the competitive setting. Next is Foundations of Rome. I recently just bumped this from a 7 to an 8 after some more plays of just the core game, and it's such a solid game. This one's super fun. You are just putting out these pieces into Rome. It reminds me a lot of Acquire, where you're soaking up these lots on the land, and once you own a lot, it's yours. Nobody can take it from you, but you're constantly deciding between placing stuff on the board to actually progress your game state or buying these plots of land in order to build up your future potential. And so that's a super simple choice, but it's a constant one, and one that's so impactful to not only your scoring, but everybody else's scoring. And it's done with this presentation that is not annoying at all. It's beautiful. It's glorious. It's gigantic, but wow, it works. I like Foundations of Rome a lot, and it's a family game that does get brought out a lot. The Foundations of Rome best thing, though, is I think it's just those simple 3 actions: the gain money, buy deeds, or place a building. That's it. Like, that's all you choose from, but the implications of those choices are huge. Least favorite part about this game? Least favorite part. Honestly, how would I describe this? I don't know. I can't really put my finger on something. Maybe, that's hard. I have to come back to this one too. So this one's similar to Wonderland's War, where I don't have something prepped for this. That's like, oh yeah, that's an immediate flaw with this game. This game's pretty great. That's Foundations of Rome. Next is Trudvang Legends. This is also on my lower ratings, unfortunately. This one here has you playing a bag building adventure game. You have this map that changes, moves around. You'll be sliding cards into it. You'll be getting these runes into your bag as you visit different locations, and then you will try to complete whatever story beats that have been presented to you. Overall, this game is story first, I think mechanism second, which is a little unfortunate. There's really no consequences to doing anything in this game, and so you're just kind of going through the motions. That being said, the story is a lot of fun. The story is cool. The characters are interesting, and the combat is fun at times, which is why it's not in that 4 or 3, because you can still have a fun time playing this one. But the game itself, I think, has a lot of rough spots. There's, like I said before, there's really no consequences to failing. Every time you can get into situations where you can just get locked and there's nothing that you can do. And then there's also this portion in the game where you can You have to do engine building at the start of every game that is just feels like grinding, which is insane in a single shot scenario game. You have to do grinding. I'm not a fan of that at all. I think that maybe you could house rule it, but I don't really like house ruling games. I'm curious to see if any expansion stuff will fix it. It's one that's still in the library because we did do that all-in pledge, and so eventually when all that other stuff comes here, I'll probably bring it out and give it a try again. But if it doesn't change, then it's going. So Trudvang Legends, I think the best part about this game are the items. Oh yeah, the items actually pretty smart. So there's this cool system they do with the items where every time you get an item, it goes in your item deck, and then if you use the top item, it goes to the bottom, and then you'll just kind of cycle through your items. So you're always using all of these things that you're picking up, which is cool. I think that's an awesome system because it encourages you to use things so that you can get to the items that you want to use that are a little bit more strong. So I think that's a smart play on the item system, but I think everything else should be bolstered a little bit. Vagrantsong is awesome. Another campaign game that I'm enjoying from this year a lot. It holds up consistently, and it's a game that you can just pick up and play, despite being a campaign game. You just grab your pack of characters, you pull them out, you bring them out, you play a unique scenario, and then when you're finished, you tally up your results and then just put it back in the bag. This is a game that feels something like Too Many Bones, where you can have that single shot experience and then be excited to play it the next time because you're in this new unique experience. This game is awesome. The art is super fun, the characters are interesting, but the linchpin here is the abilities of the characters, because the characters have 4 separate abilities each round, and as you play, you're going to need to change them out. And the abilities are funky and fresh. I love it because that's something that I look for in games like this, where it's not just looking for numbers, you're getting something cool. And this cool effect, it has implications on not just the enemies, but the allies, weird item interactions, and based on the scenario, some of those abilities will be even stronger. So I love this game. I think it's so smart, and this is one where I'll just put on the Over the Garden Wall soundtrack and go train hopping. What an awesome game. Vagrantsong, amazing. Next is Perseverance, Castaway Chronicles, another game that barely missed our top of the year list. I have so much fun with this. I was so surprised how the solo mode worked. It was pretty easy to manage, actually, despite being such a heavy game. The iconography works, but the game itself is a lot of fun. You have this strange tower defense-like game that's happening with the first game. And you have your character that's moving around the different maps with dice placement. Every single thing you do is area control, which is interesting because it's going to push you to using specific actions to gain control on them, but also kind of pushing you into other actions because you get points and extras for getting second in areas too. So you have reasons to do every action, which is awesome. I love that because the choice is real. It's there. And that's just in the first episode. And at the second episode, your choices are increased dramatically because you get access to this gigantic tech tree board. And the tech tree has just so many unique effects that you're going to look at them and be like, oh my gosh, what am I even going to do? Because you can choose how much of those you want. You can go in as much as you like. Every turn you could get one of these special abilities, which is awesome. You could play the game you want to, and I think it's a lot of fun. My favorite part about this game is the exploration mechanism. There's this way that you can tie up your characters into explorations. You send them out to go do something. I think they're called patrols in the first one. And every round at the end of your turn, you will resolve that exploration. They'll move forward and you'll get reward cards based on how you sent, how advanced they are. And then some of your characters can die on the expedition, or you can have them continue on their expedition and they'll keep on going. And those are your resources that are tied up in that expedition. And so when they eventually come back, they're coming back with all this stuff. You're like, yes, perfect, because now you have all this stuff that you could do. So it's an ebb and flow of having a lot of resources and then sending them out and then coming back and doing the best with what you can do. It's awesome. I really enjoy this one. It makes me want to go play it right now. Oh, yes, I want to go play episode 2 again. Hey, Shorty Dancer, thanks for joining us this morning. And as mentioned before, if you're here watching, please leave some comments. Let me know what you think of these games and if you'd like to know any details or any specifics here. So excited to just be talking about all these games. This is pretty great. I feel like it's flowing naturally. I'm talking away. Next is Planet Unknown, which has consistently been exciting to play, particularly in the family experience. The simultaneous play, Polyomino Lane, this is one that people are going to be instantly familiar with and understand the core mechanisms, but then get to understand the nuances of going up the different tracks and the implications of what tiles that they're actually picking and placing. I love the fact that you are only getting to choose the tile every so often, and then you have that small choice of picking between 2, because you're constantly going to be analyzing what is not only the best placement for completing rows and columns on this large planet board, but also also what tracks you're trying to go up on. My favorite part of this game is actually the objective scoring. The more and more I play, the more I love this system. You have these objectives that are in between you and your neighbors, and they have some specific condition that you're trying to reach. And generally, it's like a 5-point reward. And if you get both, that's 10 points. That's pretty significant. So if you're able to get that, it feels so good. But these objectives are going to talk about specific terrain or specific tracks or maybe specific placement of icons. And I love that because you are actively looking at what your neighbors are doing because you need to beat them. You need to figure out where you're moving the disc on your turn to give them the worst options to propel yourself forward. It's such an experience. I played this about 7 times this last week while we were on vacation, and this game is awesome. The solo mode works well. I think this game is one that I think that's one that needs to go in the collection for sure. For anybody that enjoys this style of polyomino lane, it's got the asymmetric factions of something like Terraforming Mars, where you have something that makes you unique, but it's put out, I think, a little bit more dramatically here because the planet itself can be asymmetric. So where you're placing those tiles, and also the corporations have these different tracks, and the tracks are also going to be asymmetric in tandem with the technology. So you can choose how far you boost up there. This is such an awesome game. I'm enjoying this one a lot, and I was surprised at how gripping it is and how engaging it is for everybody. It's awesome. I like Planet Unknown quite a bit. I might bump the rating on this one. That's a good thing to think about. Shorty answer. Sorry you can't stay, but I'm glad that you're able to look it back. Yeah, definitely watch it later. Excited to just share my thoughts here. Next up is Burncycle. This is one that is a stealth game that I think is probably on the lower rating side for me because just of how much I enjoy Assassin's Creed. So I'm just going to be out there up front with you. So that kind of tainted my, I think, overall impressions with this game. Burncycle, though, is a lot of fun. It's a hard one to get into. The tutorial is long and it's a little arduous, honestly. But once you get through it, you'll understand the actions, and it's something that once you just play it once, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense how it works. It has a lot less rule book looking up for like keywords and stuff because a lot of the keywords are shared for the characters, which I think is like a pro, but also could be a con because it means the variety of the different enemies and characters you're fighting are a little bit lower than usual in these chip theory games. But the game itself is solid. You have a scenario that you're trying to complete. You'll go through floors until you do. You can choose the length on the floor, so you can pick the length of experience you want. And then based on the character that you have, you are going to use their powers and abilities to complete this objective. It's a stealth game at its heart, so you're trying to throw off the scent of the different characters on the board, move around, trigger traps, get powers and abilities as you go out. That does lead a little bit to some randomness in this game because you can find items that are just clearly busted, or you can get some dice rolls that can give you more actions on a turn where maybe you weren't specifically thinking about that, or maybe get lower actions. But I think it adds to this fun situation and game. It is a lot of fun. I think Burncycle is well done. The entire experience is lovely. I think my favorite part about this game, though, is I think the best part is, I think the characters. I like the characters. They have their own special powers and abilities, which most games like this do have, but they have a specific order that you can unlock them on. There is no specific order you can unlock them on. So you have total free reign of upgrading your powers and abilities. And on the first turn of the game, you actually get time and resources to upgrade yourself. So right from the get-go, you have powers and abilities that you can use. And it's a lot of fun to see them in action and see how they play practically in that experience that you've crafted for yourself. I think my favorite part about this game, my least favorite part about this game, has to be there's a shared bot that everybody uses. And I think that's kind of annoying because in the solo mode, you still have to play two-handed, basically. So everybody has this, I think it's called the command module. There's like an extra bot. And this bot is what gives everybody their actions. I'm forgetting now. Yeah, it's their actions, right? It's the thing that like runs the burn cycle, basically. You have this bot that's shared by everybody, and it's just kind of lagging around. You use your actions to move it. It can't really do anything active, and it just feels like, I think it's such a strange design choice to have this extra bot in the game because you're not just focusing on your character and moving around the map as your bot, but you also have this thing that you're dragging along. So I'm not a big fan of that guy. It's fine in the 2-player mode, but I think in the multiplayer mode, it's kind of annoying because you're talking about, okay, do you want to move this guy? No, not really. It's a weird experience. So that's probably my least favorite part of this game is you have this rando command module bot that you also have to deal with it. Next up is a game that super surprised me. I love Frostpunk, the board game, particularly in solo. I think the cooperative version I wouldn't play it cooperative. Played it once, and it's one of those things where you have to collectively talk about the actions that the entire group is doing. So it's basically just like a community-driven solo game. it's whatever. I would not recommend this in a multiplayer setting. But the solo mode, Frostpunk is awesome. You have every choice matters, and every choice that you make is your fault, and you are trying to do your best to keep this city alive. You feel amazing on top of the world as you start off with all these resources, and then they start dwindling as you start making decisions. And every round, the storm gets worse and worse, and things get harder and harder to live in as you push towards that objective. It feels like your progress is here and the storm is here, and you're like getting to your goal, which is up here, and you're constantly getting up, and the storm is going a little bit faster, and it's eventually going to catch you up, and it does, and you die, and it's the worst, but it also is the best. You immediately want to play again. I can't recommend this one enough. I want to play this one so bad right now. This is one that when we were on vacation, I was like, if only I could bring this, but the game box is massive. So it was either bring this or bring like 10 family games. So took one for the team. It's fine. But Frostpunk, the board game, oh my gosh, this one's awesome. I just want to go play more of it. Next is Longshot, the dice game. This was bid to me as like the Camel Up killer, the Downforce killer. While I do think it is a better game than Downforce, I don't think it's close to that Camel Up status yet. Longshot, the dice game is a roll and write game with a horse race in the middle. You're going to be rolling a set of dice that move the horses, and you use those results to also get little bonuses on your board. And you can purchase horses, you can get special bonuses, you can manipulate and move the horses. The game itself has a pretty good arc because once certain characters move to certain areas of the map, you can't bet on them anymore. So there are incentives to betting on specific horses early, which I love. So I love that when the game has those sort of self-imposed timers, but they also give the players the choice to interact with those timers. So I love that. The abilities on the horses are a lot of fun. When you buy them, you get access to a special ability, which is awesome. So that's another reason to purchase things. So there's a lot of purposeful purchasing in the game, whether it be through bets or through special abilities. So I think that's very smart design choices. I do think that this doesn't have the uproaring, super engaging nature of something like Camel Up, but I think it is a more thoughtful game with the actions that you're taking and the implications of those actions. This one, the best part about this game, though, is I think I talked about it already. Probably that purposeful purchasing. I like the betting aspect in this game too, where it's like a raw multiplier. So you can accumulate it as the game goes. And then depending on how far they get, you can even get a kickback. So you don't lose everything, which is nice. Least favorite part of this game? It's kind of hard to think about this on the spot. I think that I will probably skip those for the next couple. I don't think I'll talk about my least favorite thing because it's hard. Unless it like is apparent, then maybe I'll talk about it there. But for Longshot the dice game, yes, teaching this game. Go figure. Teaching this game at high player counts, because I taught this to a bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers at one point, and they had such a hard time with not understanding the actions, but understanding what was good in the actions. Because this is a roll and write game, so you get the dice and you can use them for like any of 5 actions. And it was hard for them to understand the implications of their actions, particularly in the early game, because they were like, "Don't I just want to get a horse and get it going? Why would I buy this horse though?" It was strange. It was a strange phenomenon because the game feels like it should be simultaneous, but everybody takes their own turn and it's in like clockwise order. So it's that's another thing. So you'll roll the dice and one player takes their turn and then it goes clockwise, 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 making a single action. And so the game can also drag a little bit in that sense, because of it does want you to play with a high player count, but it also drags pretty dramatically at those higher player counts because you have so many options with that single die roll, and then you having to check and reference the die roll. Remembered. There it is. I think that's another reason that it prevented it from getting any higher, was because of that sensation and phenomenon, which is strange because it feels like it should be this fast-paced thing. And I think that once I'm going to compare it again to Camel Up does it beautifully with you have an immediate action and you're always thinking on other turns based on what's happening. And that small choice can lead you to grab something immediately and feel and get that sensation of like, oh, yes, I know this is what I want to do. This is what I was thinking about. And now because of what you did, it confirms what I want to do immediately. And so you're always thinking about what's going. It's such an awesome one. Townsfolk Tussle, this also appeared on my disappointments, lowest rated games, because of the gameplay itself. It's fine. It's like an average game with incredible art and theming, and that's I think why it gets that 6 rating as opposed to the 5 rating, because that theme and art direction is so strong, and that's what's going to get you to keep coming back, because it is a lot of fun to just be in this world and experience those different characters fighting around and moving around. it is a fun time to play. I do think that this game needs something to push it forward a little bit. I don't know if it's the market, I don't know if it's the characters, the time of the entire experience. I think maybe it would be I feel like this has like a fundamental problem with its action system though. Like you're doing so little but there's so much else going around. It's a strange one, but the art is incredible. The gameplay itself, though, could be better. Favorite part of this game, though, is the characters. I think that the bosses are fantastic. You'll have these unique characters that move around, interact, and fight in their own special ways. One of my favorite characters that you can play against is Penny Pinchetti, and she comes, depending on when she comes out, she can like make or break your whole game because her effect is she deals with the coins, the currency in the game, and so she can like punch you and she'll knock out all your coins like Sonic, and so you have all these coins running around, or maybe she'll throw a huge sack of gold at you, and now you're rich, but you lost like half your health. And so you were like, oh man, if I win this campaign, if I win this scenario, we're going to win this entire experience because we'll be rich. But if they hit you in the early game and you barely win and she's stolen like all your money, you're going to lose this entire game, which is so frustrating. And I think that's another thing with the gameplay itself, which is what kind of put it low, is randomness and luck play a gigantic factor in this game. And if bad luck happens too early, your entire experience is just going to be marred, and you can kind of understand that you're going to lose from that first round. So something to be aware of with this one is luck is a huge factor, but the experience and the thematics, as you can imagine, with like somebody throwing cash at you, is so much fun. It's so cool. The fact that they do this. Awesome time. But I just wish that the gameplay was stronger. Next is Now or Never. There's another fun game where you are playing this huge adventure. It's a single shot adventure as you're gaining these buildings on your board by spending resources, putting people into them, and then collecting different rows and column sets to how do I describe them? I guess get the most points. That's what you're trying to do ultimately. But the art is lovely. The combat system is a lot of fun as you're able to buy these items and you're like putting the items onto specific number slots. So you're increasing your odds of getting more powerful actions when you're actually fighting. And you also have these mini objective cards, which I think drive the entire experience. It's my favorite part for sure. You'll have these objective cards that say, hey, if you do this thing at this specific area, then you'll get this additional bonus. And you can choose how many of these you take throughout the course of the game. And I love that because it gives you purpose for your movement and your actions from turn one. I think a lot of games use this in spades. Another one I played this year, Trajan does this in the first round. They give you objective tiles and you're like, yes, I have some idea of what I want to start doing in this game, and it pushes you forward, it propels you. But I think it makes a lot of sense in this questing setting because it's a quest that you're going on, and you can string your quest to be like, okay, this is my plan, I'm going to go this way and come around and then do this to improve my board. The game itself is super fun. It is a little bit on the long side. Don't know if I'll play this again with like 3 or 4, but the 2-player and solo game work well. The solo mode is also awesome because it's just a single deck of cards, and the game is going to be removing options. So it is that pressure to go forward and go with those higher priority targets. So something to be aware of. The game itself, though, is a joy. It's a lot of fun. I like this world, and I think Now or Never is my favorite from the Arzium series. Next is Wayfarers of the South Tigris. I want to play this one more. My first couple plays of this, the solo modes, I didn't really enjoy that much. There's a lot of upkeep on the enemy turn, and the way that you're taking your turns are so fast, so that it felt like I was just playing the solo bot like the majority of the game, which is not something I super enjoy when it comes to this style of game. I think that Paladins of the West Kingdom probably does it best in the Garphill Games line, where the cards make so much sense and they're so easy to resolve that I love that. You just flip it, go, and then it's immediately your turn. Wayfarers of South Tigris, though, has like there's so many different options that the characters can take. So every time you're flipping a card, you're like, okay, got to do this, figure this out, and then you're going through the line. But the game itself is lightning quick when you're playing with multiple people, and I want to play more with multiplayer because the game itself is so strange. Because we were playing the first time, and I was hammering on the journal track, which is like this track in the middle that you're moving up on at the end of every time you recall your dice. And so my goal was to try to go on this track as fast as possible. I was like, okay, let's just see how much I can combo it. I'll kind of root my plan out, get these symbols. Because the heart of this game, it's a set collection game. You're just trying to get all these icons that match. And based on the matching icons, it lets you move up on this journal track, as well as if you purchase the endgame scoring, get more scoring for it. And so I was focusing on that, and some of the other players were focusing on just getting that scoring and getting those set collections. So they just ignored the entire track, and they won. I didn't win at all. I triggered the end of the game, and I was like, what the heck? How did I lose? I lost by like 10 points. I was like, what's going on here? And so I want to play this again and just look at everything and be like, okay, it's not just about this one thing. It's a little bit of everything. And I think that's awesome that there's multiple paths to victory. There's ways to dig and search for specific icons. There is that opportunism when it comes to purchasing specific endgame scoring cards towards the strategy that you're going down. I think that this could go up. I really do. But I was a little soured on the solo mode experiences, and I think my initial 2 plays of the multiplayer experiences were okay. Nothing super stellar or interesting. But I think maybe multiple plays of this could become... I think it could be something that I'm excited to play more of within the multiplayer setting. So curious to try this one again. I'm not 100% that it'll go up or down, but I think it's fun. I think it's cool. You have your characters, you're sending out, you have these dice that you can modify with different symbols, and the symbols matter because they unlock different actions for your dice, and then you can get additional bonuses for the symbols that you can just like take from that journal track to give you even more incentive to go down certain scoring criteria. I'm curious how the journal track will work though with if you're focusing on the other thing, because that's the end game trigger. So it's a strange concept here because you can get into a position where maybe you just can't advance at all on the journal track. This is such a strange one to think about. So I want to play this one more. That's Wayfarers of the South Tigris. Next is Dice Realms. This is one that's super fun. It's so easy to play. It reminds me of that. It's pretty much that expansion from Roll for the Galaxy where you have the customizable die faces. You'd be popping dice off, putting new faces on, rolling them every turn, getting resources, spending those resources, and most of those resources are just get better dice faces. And then there are different interactions with the different dice faces that will either give you currency that can maybe let you set dice faces. There's some that are attack cards. There are some that are giving you just points in varied ways. One part about this game, though, is I always end the game on accident and end up losing because the game ends when one of the 3 pools empties out and you need to take another one. And the pools are like the grain resource, negative points, and positive points. And I almost always accidentally get too many negative points or almost always generate too much grain resource. And I end up triggering the end game and I'm like, whoops, didn't mean to do that. And then I immediately lose because I just don't have any points because I've been building these engines that create these crazy combos and just propel myself into death. It's hilarious. The setup in this game is a lot of fun, though. You're going to get these random tiles that determine what different dice faces are special and available. There are some like generic ones that are always available, but the dice faces aren't just things that you can purchase for your dice, but they might change the game as a whole by changing this event die. So the event die has these 6 sides. Obviously, it's a dice, but maybe you don't notice it's a 6-sided die. But these dice have different faces that maybe you'll be in a quarantine. And so now there are dice that will immediately make it so that you lose some of your faces. And that happens turn 1. I remember playing this with my friend Scott, and it was his first time playing, and we got that as one of our faces. And he's like, wow, this game is super punishing. I was like, yeah, I've never experienced this before, because we were just losing all of our people and having to come back. And because of that introduction, there was a new dice face that allowed you to heal your dice more frequently. So it was hilarious as we were just trying to crawl back. It felt like the most punishing experience, but it was a lot of fun when we did. This is a lot of fun. I think the worst part about this game is the end of the game, honestly, because you have to take out all the dice faces and put them back. And that kind of sucks. But they tie it into the scoring to where it's not the worst thing in the world. But I think gameplay-wise, this game is so solid. It's so much fun to just grab dice, upgrade them, roll them, and immediately use them. It's got that thing again. Get abilities, immediately use them. Super fun. That's Dice Realms. Amazing game. Next is Skymines, another amazing game. This one here has you playing a stock game where you are working with these different companies. They're putting out these different areas on the board, but you can work for any company. But the core of it is this card system that I want to see all the time. Please give me every game that has this card system. You put them onto the board to take your actions, and then at the end of your turn, you pick up a discard pile, and then every card goes in its own separate discard pile. So you're constantly making this decision of, oh, geez, do I want to play all these right now because I'm pretty much never going to get them back again? Or do I set up for these awesome combo turns? And when you're discarding, you're picking which discard pile each card goes to because you're setting up your future self. It's awesome. It feels so good and gratifying when your plans come together because you did that. It was your choice and your setup, and that's the most gratifying thing. And the core game itself here is just awesome. The way you're moving up the tracks, the way you're buying new cards, it's all based on the cards that you've laid. And the symbology is simple and easy to understand, but those choices and those actions, the fallout of them is pretty critical. I love that. The Skymines is a wonderful game. Looking for the metal coins for this one. I heard that they were at Essen, but I cannot find copies of them. So if you have any inklings or ideas, let me know. Skymines is wonderful. Then we have So You've Been Eaten. Another game I was a little bit disappointed by. It's just one that does not get get played very often. I don't know how long this one's going to stay because it doesn't get asked to be played. And there's so many good 2-player games, so I don't know if this one's going to stay. I think it's going to be gone soon. But the premise itself and the art is so much fun, where you are this miner diving into this beast, or you're the beast who is trying to digest the miner, and so you are constantly going back and forth on either populating your stomach with infections or being the miner navigating through those and trying to pick up all these minerals. Gameplay is very short, simple, sweet, but overall, it's fine. I don't think it's super compelling, though. Honestly, talking about it right now, I'll make a little note to myself. This one probably needs to go. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. Okay, next is Caper Europe. This game is also amazing. Speaking of amazing 2-player games, go get Caper Europe instead. This one's awesome. The entire package just makes so much sense. It's a tug-of-war game, but the implications of your actions permeate the whole experience. When you take an action, it becomes the focal point of the turn, where you are flipping this card or resolving its icons, and then it sets you up for every future turn, because it's either going to give you scoring, additional passive bonuses, or instant effects that have actual purpose, and every card can tie into another card's ability or scoring criteria. And I think that makes it exciting, because every single card has a purpose to draft, and you are drafting back and forth. So after those first couple of turns, you're thinking to yourself, ooh, what is the fallout of this going to be? What sort of plays are they going to make? And then the turn order is also pretty critical between round to round, because you know that based on how you finish a situation, it can set your opponent up to have a powerful stride into the next one. My favorite part about this game, though, is the cards are great. Every single card is awesome. It feels so good to draft every single card in this game, which makes the choice that much more difficult, because you're thinking to yourself, I want every single card. And that's an awesome position to be in. And so when you finally decide the one that you want, it's seeing how that plays out. And I love that so much. Caper Europe is such an amazing game. And then it also has this cool system where you're able to switch in cards. You can play in different locations, and each location brings a new mechanism. We played one recently where you could collect coins from the treasury. And so it reduced the amount of coin economy that was in the game, because you were permanently removing them. But based on how many you removed, you would get special abilities or scoring at the end. So there was incentive to do so, to kind of wreck your economy. I guess you're thieves, so it makes sense, but what a fun one. Oh man, how many of these do we have left? Goodness gracious. Next is Encyclopedia. I'm going to try to go super fast on these. Let me check really quick. We're on Encyclopedia. Okay. Oh my gosh, there's so many left. Okay, it's fine. Encyclopedia. We'll do it. We're committed. Encyclopedia. So Encyclopedia here is a dice placement game. It's fine. I don't think it's overly exciting. I think that the core actions of the game are cool. I think that I would like to see them in a different game, because the game itself here is a pretty simple, not even contract fulfillment. It's like a collect cards, and then once you have enough cards, you turn them in. I don't even know how to describe this at this moment. It's fine. It's okay. I would not recommend this to anybody. I'm not going to get it myself. The game has you putting cubes on cards, and then based on how many cubes that you have on those cards and you've matched with them, you can cash them in for more points. So the game becomes a game of optimization where the choices are pretty present, and you're like, okay, clearly I'm going to go get this card because it has a matching symbol to my thing. And there's no pressure to having to cash them in, because you can hold on to them as long as you want. So you can just wait till the end of the game to cash in all of your cards, and that will give you 1 million points. And that's pretty awesome. Makes sense, because why would you not? And then you're just spending the game getting incremental bonuses from these like tech cards. And once again, it's going to be pretty obvious which ones are awesome and which ones you should be getting, because they're going to lead you to doing more of the major end game scoring, which is the cashing in those cards for points with the journal track. It's fine. I think it is a process that you'll play and be like, oh, this is neat, but I don't think it's gripping, or it will be one that brings you back. One that you should give a try, though. Maybe it'll grip you more. Next is Three Sisters. This here has you playing as farmers, and this one's a lot of fun. You'll take your farm. You'll have constant dice choices. It's a rondel of actions where the dice will populate, but on your turn, you take any of the dice that are populating this board. And so you're not stuck on the actions like in a sequence. You can pick any action, and based on the action you take, you get a bonus and a planting action. So you're always getting to do more. So the number on the dice as well as where it is matter. And I love that, because every combination is going to give you a different choice. And then based on the choices you make, you'll get bonuses, setting yourself up for this passive point generation. The earlier you invest, the more points you're going to get out of it. But then you also have these immediate bonus effects that you're going to try to rush towards as well. You have technologies, a whole shed, a shed full of technologies that you can pick from that are going to change the way that you play from that first turn if you're able to get into that shed experience. And I love the way that the game just tosses out bonuses. You're always feeling like you're doing something awesome. And in the multiplayer setting, you can do anything. You can go up every single track and just feel amazing. In the solo mode, you have a unique challenge where the solo mode is going to be eating up your choices. And so you have to prioritize specific things. So I think in the multiplayer, it has its own reasons to play it as well as the solo mode. So there's reasons to come back to both of this game. And it's so much fun. I love Three Sisters. I think it's really well done. Awesome game. Next is Cat in the Box Deluxe Edition. This one here it was strange to me because the first time I played it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest game ever. Oh my gosh, it busts my head. The way it works is a trick-taking game. On your turn, when you play a card, you decide immediately then what color it is. You say, okay, the 6 is now blue. That's a blue 6. Everybody else can do the exact same thing. Whoever wins normal trick taking, unless somebody plays a red trump, then they're going to take it. And then you'll have your next turn and you'll be like, okay, do it again. And as soon as you commit that you don't have a specific color, it's like marked on your board. So you think to yourself, okay, now I can't ever do this. And it might put you in a situation where you can paradox, where you have eliminated too many options for yourself, where you've ruined your game. It was amazing. The first time I played this game, it blew my mind. A second time I played this game, though, it immediately showed that I was like, oh, okay, so this game is going to be this exact thing every single time, and the gameplay is not going to change at all. Every single game after the first one played exactly the same. You have your cards that you play determine where you're putting pieces on like this area control board in the center, and the center you're trying to connect your pieces with where you're deciding to play them. And I think that's something people don't talk about a lot is when you play a card, if I play a 4 blue, it goes onto this main game board and there's a spot for 4 blue and you put your piece there. And that means that nobody else can claim 4 blue because you have, but you also get points at the end if you have met your bid, basically. And based on where you put your pieces, that's going to get you your extra points. And so you're always going to be trying to make that as optimal as possible. And that leads to people doing a lot of similar identical plays. And all of a sudden, this game that feels like you have so many different choices because you can do whatever you want feels a little bit more pigeonholed because you're actually picking choices based on this scoring. So it feels like you're not actually making a lot of interesting dynamic choices. And I think after that first play, you're going to immediately notice that. And that's pretty sad to me because I was like, oh man, this could be the best game ever. But unfortunately, I don't think it is. I'd like to see this idea of you choosing your own tricks in a future game, but I don't think it shines as brightly here, unfortunately. I think the reason I'm going to keep it in the library is because it does make that amazing impact the first time you play it. And so I think it's going to be one that people play a lot for their first time and just have such an awesome time with it. But I think it will not hold up on those repeat plays. So it definitely hasn't for me, which is pretty sad because I was pretty enamored with that first time. Next is Great Western Trail Argentina, a game that has definitely kept me for repeat plays. This is my basically replacement for the original Great Western Trail. Same game. You have a little character. You'll move around. You'll use your cards to interact with the different spots on the board. You're upgrading the board, which in turn upgrades your hand because your hand is used to activate the stuff on the board. And then you are trying to make sales by having different colored cows in your hand at the end of your journey. Now, the sales are twofold here, though. You actually have a resource called grain that you can use to move shipments around, and it makes so much sense. And when you deliver something, you're putting it on a ship. Based on the ship that you deliver, it determines when it's actually going to become available in future rounds. So if you put it on a high point scoring ship, it may not be able to actually deliver in time that you need to gain immediate resources now. So there's even more implications to what you're delivering as opposed to just a simple bonus. I love that because you're not just going to go down these set paths anymore. You have a bit more openness when it comes to your delivering methods. You also have more varied and interesting buildings with the new grain mechanism and the rest of the small things that have been added. You have a new character, the farmers that you can go help and recruit to your board. But one of the coolest things this game adds is strength. It's a new mechanism where you can help out farmers or participate in other actions using strength. And every card in your hand can be discarded for a strength value. And if you discard cards in your hand, you gain exhaustion, which is going to go in your discard pile. It's like a negative card, basically. It's negative points, and it also doesn't count as a cow, so it kind of sucks. But it right now changes your hand. You can have a hand of terrible cards, go help somebody, discard all those terrible cards, and then draw back up immediately to these amazing cards, and it feels so good because you're getting something awesome now. But of course, you're going to pay for it later. That's for future you to worry about. It's an awesome choice because you know exactly what your consequences are going to be, but that short-term gain is so critical and important that it's something that you're going to want to engage in. Oh, what an awesome experience. I want to play this one again too. Okay, so far we're going to go play Perseverance, we're going to go play Frostpunk, and we're going to go play Great Western Trail Argentina. Next is Familiar Tales, another one I was disappointed by. This is a campaign game that the story is awesome. The voice acting is super well done, but the game itself is just fine. You have a little bit, you have not a little bit, you have way more openness that you need to in a game like this. There's no real pressure to push you forward. So it has a similar problem like Trudvang Legends had, where you were just kind of wandering, not aimlessly, but procedurally. You're like, okay, I need to go get all these things. I need to do as many skill tests as possible so that way I can get the upgrades, increase my deck. There were points in this campaign where I ran out of upgrade cards to purchase because I just didn't have enough. I had so much money and so much resources that I just ran out of stuff to do. And I think that's something that needs to be removed from the game. I think having choices present and making tough choices is something that's going to be gripping and engaging and feel more gratifying when you get to take them. This one felt like just kind of an exercise in like, yeah, this is what you do. And that's not something I enjoy in board games. So I love the art and I love the story, but I think that the game itself is a little bit on the weak side. It reminds me a little bit of Townsfolk Tussle, where you're like, oh, I want to keep it for that theme, but seeing as this is a campaign game, probably not going to happen. So had to go. That's Familiar Tales. Next is Resist. This one's pretty fun. This one is a deck building game. Not deck building game. Kind of. You don't really build your deck. I guess you do. You draft at the beginning, and that's the way to play, by the way. So it's a deck management game. There you go. Deck management game where you'll be using your cards in your deck in order to interact with the board. You're going to pick a mission, and then based on the mission you pick, you're reaching a specific strength target, and then you'll be generating this strength with cards that you play. And then you'll flip over all these enemies, and then you'll have all these enemies that you have to allocate your strength to as well. You're trying to complete the mission while also saving the populace and also saving the resources in your deck. Because every time you play a card, you decide whether you want to use an immediate bonus for something super strong, but then you lose that card forever, or a weaker bonus, but you get to keep that card in your deck. So making that constant choice and using your resources wisely is going to propel you toward your endgame state. Best way to play this game is the draft variant. At the very start of the game, you'll be building your deck, and so you're only using, I think it's half the cards in the game, which is awesome. So you're constantly picking between cards, and you see how those cards work. And I also recommend that you play in the scenario-based mode. That gives you one big objective that you must complete. And so now you have a little bit more purpose in what you're doing and why you're deck building. Because in the original game, you just went as far as you could, and it said you could stop whenever you wanted, which is fine. You're never going to stop because you're just going to try to get to the end, because why would you? I don't think there's a reason not to gameplay-wise. Maybe thematics-wise, yes, but the scenarios actually give you a goal. You need to do this thing, and it's a little bit more varied than just beat all the stuff, which is awesome. So you actually have a purpose, and so now there's a little bit more importance and purpose towards getting rid of cards and when you actually want to use them. So I love that sensation and feeling. Resist is one that I'm going to be coming back to. Speaking of a game I'll come back to, Acropolis is awesome. This one's another one that we brought on vacation. Excellent family game, easy to play and understand. You're taking a tile and putting it down, and based on where you put it, you're going to get scoring. Scoring's a little bit something hard to wrap your head around on the first play, but the games take like 25 minutes. So a lot of the time, people play the first time, be like, okay, let's do it again. Immediately start playing again, and it's a lot of fun. I like this one. It reminds me a bit of something like Cascadia, but I love the way that it encourages you to stack up, cover things, and so that it makes grabbing bad tiles. So I don't think any tile in this game is bad, but it makes grabbing bad tiles or tiles that are not working for you not a terrible thing, because you always build on top of them. But it does mean that your placement matters that much more, because you want to set yourself up for those options. There's also a currency in the game that you only get through stacking, which just pushes you to do it even more. And the currency gives you more choices on your turn, which is huge, because the way that you score is similar to like King Domino, where you're getting these stars based on how many stars you have. That's how much your terrain of that type scores. And different terrains have different star rates, and there's different amounts of those stars in the deck. So getting the prioritization and the actual choice of picking the one you want is an awesome feeling. I think that this is one that if you like tile stacking, if you're looking for a light, approachable family weight game, Acropolis is one you need to check out. This one's super awesome. Paint the Roses. I also talked about this one during my lowest rated board games of the year. It's not one that I found super engaging or compelling. Didn't own this one, so I can't speak too much to it. I did talk with the designer of the game actually about this one, and he told me that the best way to experience this one is through repeat plays and digging deeper into the strategy. There's like a strategy guide that he recommended I go check out on Board Game Geek, and so if that's something that interests you for a deduction game like this, maybe go check that one out. For me, it's not something that's going to be super compelling to me. Having to go research a game like this and having to think, okay, before I can properly engage with this game, I got to go read this thing. I think that this one, it presented itself as a game that anybody should be able to pick up and play and have a good time with. And for me, it was just okay at that point. So it might serve you well with those repeat plays, something that you're interested in. If you want to go with that designer's advice, go check out the BGG page. There should be a link in that forum to show you, hey, look at this. This is the strategy guide. Go take a look at that. And that might have you start with a better experience. So if you're teaching this game, that might be something to talk about to get people engaged with that higher level of thinking in the game. To me, it wasn't something that was super compelling or gripping, though. So that's Paint the Roses. Yes. Let's go. Let's continue. Awesome game, Ascension Tactics Miniatures deck building game. This one's so good. This is a deck building game that is scenario based, where you are having these 4 champions. You'll send them out into different lanes to pursue whatever your objective is, whether it be controlling different points, doing a capture the flag game, generating these victory points in specific ways. And that's based on the scenario that you pick. So every single game is going to be different because of your champions pairing with the scenarios. You draft your champions at the beginning, so you're picking ones that are going to do well for you in that scenario. And then based on the cards that come out during the game, you'll build your deck in order to advance your position towards its objectives. It's a brilliant deck building system where you'll have this ever-flowing market that have abilities. When you purchase them, when you play them, you're going to want to decide whether to invest on the now or the future. You have champions of varied strength costs, so you're picking characters in order to tier your strength level or your abilities or your pairings. You're looking for combos to make everything work. And I think that the game itself it's brilliant. I think this is one that I'm going to play a lot of. The solo mode works spectacularly. The cooperative mode works amazing. The 2-player, though, is my favorite. I think the 2-player is by far the best way to play this, particularly because the scenarios for the 2-player are just so interesting and awesome. So that's my recommendation. Get this game for any player count. This is one of the best games that came out this year for sure. So big fan of Ascension Tactics Miniatures deck building game. Next is Mythic Mischief. This one here is a lot of fun, in my opinion, in the solo capacity or in a 2-player capacity if both players really are not prone to AP at all, basically. This is a abstract game where you have your own character with their own special way of moving and interacting. And on your turn, you're spending action points to move around on a board to set up your enemies to put them in the path of the Tome Keeper. Tome Keeper is this giant creature that moves around the board. And if it steps on you, you take your character off and you get a point for taking off your opponents. You lose a point if you get taken off yourself on your turn. So you're moving yourself around using your abilities. The critical thing here, though, is the asymmetry it's a feature, but also it can be a bug, unfortunately, because in that multiplayer setting, there's a lot of AP that can happen because of the way that the different characters interact. You're going to be looking at your stuff and your opponent's stuff, the implication of those choices, because on your turn, you'll spend all your action points, do those things, and then it's your opponent's turn. And they have to take whatever you just did and basically be like, okay, I couldn't really plan on your turn because I didn't know what you're doing. So now it's my turn. I'm going to think about what I'm going to do, and I have to make all these decisions now. And so it's a game where you can't plan and every action matters, because sort of like in a game of chess, you can get those gotcha moments where you're like, oh, I just put my thing in the wrong spot, didn't realize the ability, whoops. And so to avoid those mistakes, you have to sit there and analyze the options, the board, and all of the things that your opponent can do, because all that information, it is a perfect information game, and that's something to be aware of. So I'm not a big fan of perfect information games. I think that they lead to these moments where people are just sitting there and staring at the board and knowing exactly what to do. It's not something I enjoy. I think that you need a bit of randomness to push people to make decisions as opposed to having all the information out there. That being said, the solo mode of this does that exact thing. There are these detention cards that are going to be randomly chosen every turn. You have 3 that are face up, but you're not sure which one's going to show up. And I love that so much. You also have a dice system that's going to determine where the enemy responds things. So you're not ever sure what's going to happen, which means you cannot perfectly plan every single turn. And I love that. It's going to push you to make decisions and engage with the solo mode, which is challenging. You're going to move around, try to complete the different characters, but you still get to benefit from the asymmetry of your faction because it's going to change how you interact with the enemy AI. I love the solo mode for Mythic Mischief. It was on my top of the year. It is a lot of fun to play solo. I don't know how often I'll return to this multiplayer, though. But that's Mythic Mischief. It's a good one. Next is Batman The Dark Knight Returns the game. This is another solo board game. I have not played. There's like a versus mode that was added where you can play 1 versus 1. Don't know about that because I think that the solo mode is so strong, but the solo mode is very cool. There's a campaign where you'll go through the entire story of the comic book, and the comic book, the art is there from the comic book. It's a lot of fun. I think it's well done. Once you get through the campaign initial time, though, you'll understand all the systems. You'll understand the mechanisms from the different scenarios, and I think it does become very easy after that, and it's honestly not as gripping when you are super familiar with the system. But that being said, there's an awesome change to this where they have these scenarios that are like nightmare scenarios, basically, in the back of the book, and those are awesome. So I think that's my favorite way to play this game is you play these nightmare scenarios that just put you up with these impossible odds, and it feels like you were just Batman. You are the Dark Knight. You're slugging through these super challenging beasts because the board is in this state of chaos, and it feels awesome when you pull out a win. It's a great experience. So that's my favorite way to play this one. I strongly recommend it in that nightmare setting. It's so much fun. Next is One Deck Galaxy. This is a huge improvement on the original One Deck Dungeon for me because of the way that you're able to allocate your lower dice. So what is One Deck Galaxy? This is a game where you are having a character, you have a federation, and then you have this terrible boss. It's like a planet, basically. Planet aliens, this huge civilization that you're fighting against. And every turn you'll be rolling dice and allocating them to different areas to increase your skills, to move up progress on different planets, as well as ultimately commit them to defeat this giant planet in the center that you're fighting against. And so you have all of these different things that you're building progress on. And that's the biggest change for this game is you can access everything. In the original game, every turn you would just pick one card and you would interact with just that card. In this one, all 4 cards are revealed. And every turn you decide after you roll your dice where you want to allocate these dice to. And you can allocate them to every single card. So there's a reason to focus on certain things. And they are going to collect cards and build up. And eventually you'll get to a certain threshold on each where you can cash them in and get their bonuses. And your main goal in the entire game, though, is to complete the 4 there's like 4 boss objectives that you're trying to beat before the boss does its thing and kills you. And by generally eliminating the deck or getting to the end of their encounter deck, if they are able to do that, then you will lose. That it's gonna pace you out. And so the game itself it's fun. I think it's a little bit on the long side, and I think it can be a little bit tedious at times, but it is fun, which I think is important. And you do feel like you're never out of options, and I think that's also important. So you roll the dice, you allocate them, and the strong dice are just as important as the weak dice, but you have so many choices with the dice. That's what makes it challenging and interesting. And I think that's awesome. That's something that the game desperately needed, was a purpose for the dice, and you can actually use them. That's important, right? You want to use these things that you've earned. Otherwise it sucks. It feels terrible. So I think there are a lot of improvements on the original, and I think it stands out here. That's One Deck Galaxy. I do recommend this one. It is fun, and the deluxe edition is so nice. You have these plastic cards and shiny components. It's well done. Next is S.H.E.O.L. This is one that I've had some fun with. It's not one that is bringing me back, unfortunately. I think it's got that thing that Trudvang has where it feels like it's a little bit of grindy at the beginning of each game, but in a different way as you're doing this route building each game. But the game itself has you playing these warriors of light. You'll have these different abilities and items that all use your health essentially as your resources. And so you are using your lights to build paths on the board. And then based on the paths that you're creating, you're able to interact and engage with your settings. You're exploring around, you're moving to these different areas, and then you have like event cards that you can do. You're getting upgrades, you're fighting enemies, and you are trying to complete the mission's objectives. I don't want to get any spoilers here, but you have these big bosses that you'll be eventually fighting, and you're upgrading yourself and your citadel. You're sort of gaining all of these things to propel yourself in this campaign. So it is a campaign again. That's something to be aware of. The reason that it's not as high as others is you do have some form of grinding every single time you play, because the board starts off pretty much empty at the start of each round, and you need to build out these light paths around the map. It is a core mechanism of the game, so if it's something you enjoy, it's going to be super gripping for you. For me, it is cool to do, but I do feel like it's a little bit tedious at points because you have to, okay, I did all this progress last game, but I now have to completely reset on this next mission and scenario. So I think it is fun for like a one-shot scenario because you do have that exploration aspect, and it is fun to talk with your team to try to figure things out. But I think that might be the reason it's not getting played as much as other campaign games. My favorite part about this game, though, is, what do I like the most about this one? I think the action cards are a lot of fun. So every character has their own unique deck of action cards that have ways to augment your actions or do super unique things to you. And I think that's awesome because you can also, as you keep on playing, you can buy new cards for your specific deck that are from like these 3 different factions, and then they can spice up your different card combos and interactions. And so you're using the cards as either defense or for their own special abilities or to augment your actions. And so they're multi-use, which is super fun. And I think it's a great system system that's also another foundation of the game. So I think that those two things, it's strange because I like one so much, but one is they're both so integral to the core experience. Overall, I think S.H.E.O.L is going to find its audience, and people are going to enjoy this one. I'm not sure how popular this one is, but I think it's one you should check out if you're interested in this idea of like the civilization building game, but you do have that work that you're doing of putting out the paths. But the pathing is cool. You have this bag of tiles, so you'll have choices on what you take and what you put out. And so there is planning and cooperation and coordination, which is something that is interesting. And I think that you will find that fun. That's S.H.E.O.L. Next is challenges. I'm going to get a drink really quick. All right, let's continue. Next is another big surprise. This is S.H.E.O.L. So not S.H.E.O.L. Next is another big surprise. This is Challengers. And this game is awesome. I was so surprised. I actually got this one on recommendation that it was supposed to be something like auto chess. I heard that this was something like auto chess, where you're building up your units and then seeing how those units eventually attack and take people out. I watched the Dice Tower review of this, and there were 2 people that loved it and 1 person that absolutely hated it. So I was a little worried about what I would think when I got to play it. And thank goodness it fell on the other side of the coin. This is one that I actively recommend. I'm actively asking to play, particularly in big group settings. It does something really cool where it's best, I think, with 2, 4, 6, or 8 players. And the fact that it plays up to 8 is awesome. But you are essentially having matchups with the players at the table. You're going to be told where to sit. You'll fight against the person that's across from you. And then after that happens, you'll be able to get a time where you build up your deck and add new cards to it, get rid of cards, and then set yourself up for the next match. And so you're doing this for the entire experience. And then whoever does the best in the entire tournament, the top 2, will have one final showdown. And the winner of that wins the entire game. It reminds me so much of like my Yu-Gi-Oh days, where you are waiting for your matchups. You're looking at what people are doing to see what sort of cards they have. You're building your deck to adjust to what certain players are doing, because there's some cards that will be strong based on what other players have done or what they do. There are characters that have synergies within themselves, and in similar auto chess fashion, you get bonuses for collecting cards of the same name and type. And so you have this hand of 5 cards that you'll be looking through, and every turn you could dump all your entire hand to search better cards. You can choose from which different tiers that you're picking cards from. If you pick from lower tiers, they're going to be weaker cards in general, but they have identical names, so you can get a lot of the same card, and that benefits you, because that's one of the ways that you can lose is by having various different named cards in your deck. It's such a cool experience, and I think it definitely captures that auto chess feel. And the one that I play a lot is the Hearthstone Battlegrounds. I think that one does an amazing job, and this reminds me a lot of that sensation. It's such an awesome game, and it plays up to 8, and it does it so well. You have the combinations of characters, you moving around, you're checking in on your friends. You're like, oh, how'd you do in that last round? Like, oh, the great card. And it's a positive experience, because in vein of something similar to like Quacks of Quedlinburg, you're getting the opportunity to upgrade your deck as you see fit based on these cards that you're picking from, and then you're seeing how they play. You don't have a lot of choice in the actual play of your deck, but in that construction, that's where the game is figuring out what you're going to add, what sort of strategies that you're going to try to set yourself up for, and then hopefully they're able to come out when you're doing that capture the flag battle. So if you enjoy Quacks of Quedlinburg but are looking for something that's like a deck building style of that, I recommend this game strongly. And if you like that tournament feel, this is the perfect game for you. I played this for the first time, immediately played it 2 in a row, and I think we played 6 people. Yeah, 6-people game, 6-person game. Played 2 times in a row because we love it so much. And then this is a family game that I recommend as well, because it is so easy to just get people playing and enjoying. And the best way to teach it also has to do with just playing around. You have people watch and do the actions and see how the game works and take the flag, and then people are up and running and going, and they can ask questions. And it's so easy to like pause what you're doing and be like, hey, yes, this is how that works. I can help you out. And wow, what an awesome game. I was so happy for this one. Yeah. I like Challengers a lot. This is a great game. Speaking of another amazing game, this is one of my favorite from the year. Played this one like 20 times in the last week. This is Paperback Adventures. This is a roguelike deck building game with words as its core. And I cannot speak highly enough of this one. It has you constantly progressing, getting powers, abilities, customization in small doses, but getting to see the implications of those small doses over and over again. This is like ultra dopamine, because you are constantly getting effects and powers and getting to use them and feeling amazing the whole time, and the game is no pushover. You can change the game's difficulty to make it easier or more difficult, but the standard is one that you'll need to get familiar with and play. And once you've mastered it, there are ways that you can change it up to make it more challenging. And that's something that I really dove into this past couple of weeks. This features so highly on the solo and the best of the year. I won't go too detail on all the things that I loved about it, but I want to talk about the specific purple cards that we were using. There are these purple cards that you can use. I'll do a quick overview. So Paperback Adventures, you are fighting your encounter system, 6 encounters, and they're randomized. You'll have your character that's unique and special. You have a deck of letter cards that you're using. Every turn you build a word, top card gets a special ability, and the icons in every other card are going to determine what actions you get to take. And so you'll do all that stuff, and then you'll go back and forth fighting this creature until you eventually defeat it. And based on how you defeat it, you get additional rewards, and then you spend those rewards on upgrades. You do this until you defeat a final boss, hopefully. Now, the thing that I changed up dramatically in this past week was I use these purple cards that add modifiers to the game. And one of the modifiers that I played with was I cannot use the enemy vowel. So my deck was all the letters that I got. Another modifier that I used was I started with like 8 health or something ridiculous. Or I would, every time I got penalty cards, which are like the worst letters ever, like Q's and R's and J's and W's, J's and Y's, I had to get double the amount. And so my deck was just full of these terrible letters. And it was so much fun though, because while yes, you can increase the difficulty, there are also cards that can decrease the difficulty, so you can pair them up with those. Or certain MacGuffins, these passive abilities can make it so those negatives are actually positives. In particular, there was one that I was playing the penalty one. That was the only one that I was using, where every time I got penalties, I got double. It was insane. I sometimes would have the entire penalty deck in my whole deck. But I found this card that made it so that every penalty that I used in a word got a bonus. And I was like, yes, this is amazing. This is perfect. And so it turned this terrible thing into a good thing and rewarded me for using these terrible letters in my words. And it was so awesome. God, it was so good. And in tandem with the special abilities and different characters and their items and their effects, the different difficulty increases and decreases are going to have even more crazy implications. There was one where you could make it so that, what was it? I think you could get a second wild. There's one where you get a second wild, but there's one where you drew like less cards. There's one where you made it so that the enemy Val had more benefits to using it. Oh God, there's just so many good things. I just remember having these different combinations and just feeling flabbergasted at the interactions that would occur based on those small rule changes. And it makes sense. There's difficulty ratings on each of them, and the implications of those are present from that first encounter. Amazing game. If you haven't played Paperback Adventures, you need to. It's the best solo game that came out this year, and it's the best word game out there, in my opinion. I don't know if I'll ever play the original Paperback again. I don't know how often I'll play. I still like Word on the Street. That's a pretty dang good game. But Paperback Adventures is so good. Oh my gosh, I could play this for days. I want more characters. That's what I want. That's my wish. That's my New Year's wish. I want more Paperback Adventure characters. Next is Isle of Cats Explore and Draw. How many do we have left? Oh, we're almost there. All right. Isle of Cats Explore and Draw. This one has you playing Isle of Cats, but they've taken away the drafting. That's pretty much it. There's no longer that direct competition between the players, and I think that is something that this one misses, and I think that's why it is a 5 for me here. It took the thing that encouraged the interaction and the competition in the original Isle of Cats and removed it completely, and I think that's a huge mistake from Isle of Cats Explore and Draw. Not going to be the one that I ever play. I don't really want to talk much about this because it was on one of my culling videos, and I think that's the most general I can say about it is it removed the drafting aspect that made that game so interesting, and now it's a standard roll and write game, and it's not something I enjoy very much. So it's Isle of Cats Explore and Draw. Next is Star Wars Jabba's Palace, a love letter game. This one is a improvement on the original love letter. It has new endgame conditions, but at its heart, it is still a love letter. You're going to choose a single card in your hand, and your choices are pretty small each round, and a lot of times they are telegraphed. But because of the new features, there are reasons to play cards in unique and interesting ways. So I think that is why it reached that bump from 5 to 6 to me. It is one that I will play over the original. I think that I still prefer Infinity Gauntlet over this one because of the theming and just the general one versus all is just a lot of fun. I love being Thanos in that game. It's so awesome because your cards are just so busted. And I think the options are present there, but the coordination is there too. But I think that this one it's definitely an improvement on the original. And if you like the Star Wars theme, it's a fun one to get as well. Marvel Remix is awesome. This game is well done. It is a new retheming of Fantasy Realms, uses the Marvel IP. It has removed a lot of the keywords and replaced them with icons, and I think it is more legible that way. They're on like the side of the cards. They're easy to read, adjust, and be able to think about scoring. My favorite thing that this one does is it adds a villain deck, which are basically harder to score cards. At the start of the game, you start with one automatically, and then you could progressively get more of these villains as you play, and so you can make it so that your hand is like full of villains, which is so fun. I love juggling hard to score objective criteria. So that's one of my favorite things about this game. My least favorite thing about this game is that they took away the ridiculous scoring opportunities from the original Fantasy Realms. That was one of my favorite things about Fantasy Realms, is how crazy some of the scoring can be. You're like, oh my gosh, how the heck am I supposed to do this? And it took all that shoot the moon aspect away from the original Fantasy Realms. And so I think that's something that Marvel Remix has done to make it more accessible, which makes sense. So I think I understand why they did it. And I think that because they have that villain deck, it makes up for it a little bit. But I think that Fantasy Realms is still going to be my preferred way to play this system of games. But I think this is one that it will get brought out because of the theming and because it's so approachable. So Marvel Remix is an awesome game. I recommend it, particularly if you like Fantasy Realms and if you like the Marvel theme, go for it. Next is Batman Everybody Lies. This one's pretty dang cool, and I think it's a step in the right direction for the detective system. Totally disappointed with Dune House Secrets, which was the Dune detective game, but Everybody Lies was so much fun to play. This takes you in the Batman universe, but you are still detectives and you have cases and you have leads that you're following for these cases, but it's in the Batman universe. So you have these implications of these ridiculous supervillains that you have to deal with, and Batman as well. The best thing about this game, though, is the scene deck. There is a deck of cards that shows you the art of the things that you're interacting with, and I love that so much. It really brings the flavor in this game, particularly because you get to see the comic book artwork in the game. I love that so much. The weakest things in this game, though, are the locations. I thought it was really dumb. They were like, it made it so that the abilities of the characters just weren't things because they all just had to do with the location, so it made them not super interesting or varied at all. And then I think that the objective system was an awesome idea, but I think it wasn't done as well as it could have. There are these small objectives that every character will get. They'll get an envelope that has something that you're trying to do in addition to the case, which is awesome. I love that so much. But I played as a character who the objectives that they were doing weren't very interesting, which was really sad because they honestly ended up lining up with the case a lot of the time. So it didn't feel like I was actually doing anything extra or out of the ordinary, or like making decisions like having to pick between the main case and my own private objective. So I wish that that was improved on a little bit, but I think this is the best step forward for the detective series. I've been pretty disappointed in the last two. I thought the Pat one was really not that great after the first half of it. It had a strong start, but then immediately filtered out. And then I think that House Secrets was one of my worst gaming experiences from last year. But this one is a lot of fun, and I recommend it. If you like Batman, you're gonna love this. And if you enjoy detective and you're interested in Batman, I think you'll have fun with this one too, because it does put that detective work front and center. Next is Framework. This is very similar to Nova Luna. You are going to have these tiles that you're taking and building up a board in front of you, and these tiles will have scoring opportunities present based on the adjacencies that you're making. So it's simple to play and get into, and the drafting system, they basically removed all of the fluff in this game and have been like, hey, you're just taking a tile and you're just going to put it in front of you, you're going to score. And they did it well. I mean, it makes sense. You have 4 tiles in the middle of the board. Number of players plus 1, I think. And so if you're the active player, if you're going first, you also get the last tile. And so you're constantly just taking stuff, putting it around, and adjusting your board. Not a lot of interaction in this game. You're very much focused on yourself, as it's a race to complete as much scoring criteria as possible. But I do think it is fun. It is engaging. You're always playing. And I think that's important because this is a game that has almost no downtime, as you're just always taking something, placing it, thinking about which tiles you want, and immediately putting those out on the board. And then as soon as the tile's out, you just grab new ones, put them out, and start playing again. I wish there was more direct interaction in this game. I think it's going to prevent it from being super high ever. But I do think for what it is, I think this might be the best one in this category. It's also a little on the ugly side, but it is functional for being ugly. So, if that makes sense. It makes sense why they've done it this way. They're like rings of materials. And so the theming's like whatever, as you're like getting bricks and steel and grain, I think, and stuff like that. And you're just they're these rings. And so you're looking at the rings as well as the scoring criteria on the rings. So it can be a little weird on the iconography, but once you start playing a little bit, you'll get it like, okay, that makes sense. but that's framework. Next is Spires and Hildegard. This is a lot of fun for the theming and the story. I've enjoyed the Spires End universe. I actually think that the original Spires End is the better game, but I think that the Hildegard is the world that I want to be in more. It has a limited color palette as you are getting this amazing artwork that propels this story forward as you are this character who's going on a delivery. I'm not going to get any spoilers here. There's a playthrough on the channel, so if you're curious, go check it out there. But the game itself is a simple game of dice rolling. You'll be rolling dice, you can save some to re-roll others, and you're trying to match these bullseye symbols. So very simple skill system that is fun to do and fun to play. But I think that the story is what carries this game, as you are making decisions that have immediate impacts, you're gaining items, and you'll see how it plays through each time. Every playthrough is going to be different, even though you do meet some different story beats, some of the same story beats. But I've played this game 3 times now, and each time I've played, I've encountered things that I've not seen in others, and some terrible moments, some great moments, and some early deaths that I was unaware that could happen in this game. So there's lots of different endings that you can make as well. So that's something to be aware of with Spires and Hildegard, that it is very much story first, but I think the story is done well, and the entire presentation is lovely. It's my favorite artwork of the year for sure. Next up is Vengeance Roll and Fight Episode 1, a roll and write game that I have had a lot of fun with, where you are doing this real-time dice rolling to collect symbols, and then you'll allocate those symbols to different abilities, and then after you've done your real-time dice rolling, then you use those symbols that you've used. I think it's a great system because you are focusing on the dice rolling, and your goal is to get matching symbols. And then once you've gained them, then you can take the time and use those symbols to activate different abilities and rolls. My favorite thing about this game is the upgrade system. At the start of each round, you're going to get essentially upgrade points, and you can use those points to either get new items that are like one-time bonuses. You can get new abilities that you can allocate your symbols to. You can get these just straight up victory points, or you can get, what's the last one? Extra health, which gives you basically more re-rolls and more opportunities to gain symbols. And so every single round, you're getting to get special abilities and bonuses. So you feel like as the game goes on, you are progressing. And I think that's awesome. I wish more games did this. It actually makes me think back to games like Project Elite, which is awesome, by the way. But I think that Project Elite is missing this level up system that I think is present here. In Project Elite, you're kind of leveling up by gaining items and killing bosses, but I don't think they are as apparent and as present as they are in here. And I wish that more games that had real time had this feature, because otherwise it's kind of just an exercise of just doing the same thing over and over again, as opposed to doing new things and being more excited to use these new abilities that you're getting. I think Vengeance Roll and Fight does that well here. Next is Phantom Inc. This is one of my favorite party games from this year. This is a word game where you have a player who plays as a ghost, and they are giving one letter at a time word hints for these prompting questions. And so it's up to the medium who's talking to this ghost to tell them when to stop by like knocking on the table. And so you will constantly be pushing your luck on the amount of information you're getting. I think that's awesome. They push your luck into a word game, and it works so well here. This leads to aha moments where you're able to get this trickle of information and then all of a sudden make a connection based on the words that everybody's trying to tell. And it's such an awesome time. I think this is done so well. My favorite part about this game, though, is the question card. So every turn, you have the choice to either guess what the actual word is or to ask a question. When we ask a question, you'll give 2 cards from your hand of like 6 or 7 to your ghost, and the ghost picks the one that they want to actually answer. And so this can give you some information because you're like, ooh, they didn't pick this one because maybe that doesn't really point in a good direction, or maybe this answer was just so good that they were able to give it face up, and the opponent gets to see what card was not picked. And so I think that's also an interesting feature, as they're able to extrapolate what you could potentially be giving clues for. So I love that system. I think that Phantom Inc. is so well done. I think it's my favorite party game of the year. Yes, it is. Haven't played Green Team Twins yet, but that one is sitting on the floor over there. So it came in while we were gone. Next is Battlecrest Fellwood's base game. This one I was a little bit on the disappointed side with because I was expecting a new earth-shattering skirmish game, but I did get a skirmish game that does feature unique abilities, powers, and playstyles, which I think is awesome, but the game feels more like a puzzle game to me, as it does have perfect information, and so there's no real super tension with luck or anything like that, no risk that comes in this game, as you're pretty much guaranteed to resolve every action every time. I think the solo mode is a little weak as well, as you are not worried about like range, so they eliminated the range in the solo mode, and so there's you have this like procedure and you're just trying to optimize the way that you're using the bonuses on the main game board. And I think that's present in the multiplayer as well. So I wish that it was a bit stronger. I think the entire design is so smart because the way that they use the cards, the empty spaces are the board. You have these different cards that serve as the locations. You have characters that when you use their abilities, you can either use them and then exhaust them. You can flip them over to refresh them, but then it changes your skill ability set. And so I think that if there was a bit more randomness in this game, I'd be more interested in giving it a try. But seeing as it's more like a puzzle game first, it's not one that I'm going to come back to. Next one, these two actually just came in. I don't think I'll be reviewing them heavy on the channel, but I did play them over vacation. These are from Button Shy Games. These were sent to me. Wild Tales and Fishing Lessons were both sent to me. Battlecrest I did buy, but Wild Tales and Fishing Lessons were sent to me by the publisher. Wild Tales, A Pirate Legacy, is a legacy game about collecting symbols and then using those symbols to progress on objectives. And so on your turn, you are going to be presented with a choice of a card. And this card is going to tell you, okay, do you want to do one of these four things? And most of them are gain symbols. And then when you gain those symbols, you'll put them onto your character, and then they're out of circulation of the deck. And then when you eventually cash them in, they'll go into your discard pile, and then you're able to use those symbols, then put them in the discard pile, and then increase an objective. And so you have these objectives that you're sort of have four parts, and you're trying to progress on each of them. And I don't want to get into any spoilers of any legacy stuff here, but the reason that this game didn't really click for me is I thought that portion of the game, that resource gathering, was not super interesting. I thought that the choices were pretty obvious on those. And then as you continued, there would be moments where you would lose cards from the deck permanently, and they would go on to this enemy that you were fighting, basically. And one of your actions you can do instead of taking resources or fighting is go fight that enemy. And if you fail that fight, then you would need to spend the next turn to go to that fight. And you have to do the skill check system to do so. And there would get into certain moments in the game where the enemy could take your cards that had like the highest numbers for skill checks, and you could just straight up lose because you just didn't have the power to overcome this character, or just the way that the cards came out. There was nothing you could do. And so this entire experience felt like you were just doing this monotonous action of just taking these cards, and then you could just lose at the drop of a hat based on just these random results. And so it felt like your choices didn't really matter that much when you were playing. So that's why I'm not super impressed with this one. That's Wild Tales of Pirate Legacy. Next up is Fishing Lessons. This is another one that was provided. This is a solo game of fishing. I think the theming here is awesome. You are all remembering these fishing lessons from you're a character in a family where this man has died. And so you are remembering your fishing lessons based on whatever his relationship was to you. He could be your father, your husband, your brother, your uncle, you're somebody in this family, and you're reminiscing back to it. And so this takes place in this game of setting these cards up in front of you, and you are trying to flip cards to have a certain combination by the end of the game. If you're playing the normal mode, you just need to have it at the end of the turn. If you're playing hard, you have to make it to the very end of the game doing so. And what it ends up being is almost a programming sequencing game, but with a little bit of memory added in, particularly if you're playing the long game. And so your card might say that, hey, you need to make sure that you have 2 Bs and 2 As face up at the end of the round or at the end of the game. And so you'll be playing cards to move your character and then flipping cards. And so most of the cards do that. On your turn, you either play one face up or you replace one. And so you're always building either bigger or replacing. And so you're trying to set yourself up in a situation where you create a sequence that makes it so that game state is exactly what you want it to be. For me, I found this game to be honestly fun for like the first couple of times you play. You're like, oh, nice, I play my card, that's fun, it makes sense, I'm flipping my things, I'm trying to find this. But the games would end pretty abruptly if you're playing the normal mode, because it was just so easy. It was honestly just super easy to do. And then in the long mode, you had these situations where you were pushing the game towards like the end game super fast, basically. And then using memory to memorize the different cards to make sure that when you got to like those last couple of turns, that's when you were actually making the big decisions, because then you could time it so that the game would end at the moment that you wanted it to. And so the game felt, it's almost like you gamed the system, where the difficulty that was supposed to be there wasn't really present, unfortunately. And you could easily just curb it so that it was super easy to deal with, I think, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's a fun experience. I think it's a cool one to try, but I don't think it's going to be one that I ever come back to. As you can see, the 5 rating here, I think it's an average game. It's nothing super compelling that's going to push me coming back to it, but also nothing super detrimental. It's going to be like, this actually was a negative experience for me. Next up is, I think this is the last one. This is On Tour Paris and New York. So I am not a gigantic fan of On Tour. It feels like it takes a long time to play through this game. It reminds me of something similar to, honestly, Ohanami or The Game, as you are trying to get these numbers and trying to put them in specific situations and positions. And at the very end of the game, you're connecting based on increasing numbers. So you'll be writing numbers in different locations, and based on the way the cards come up, that determines what location that you can write them on and what number you can put in that location. And when you're finished, you'll draw your route, and you'll also go from lowest to highest and try to reach as many different spots as possible. Paris and New York are pretty much the same game, but they add little tiny rules. For example, New York allows you to draw in boroughs, and they're like these specialists in these different boroughs that you're trying to get to. And then you can also draw ferries. And I actually like this a lot. It's the reason it has a 6 as opposed to a 5, is the ferries allow you to draw your own they allow you to draw your own roads. So actually similar to Batman. In Batman, you could do this. You'll draw your own routes to connect places. But in New York, you can draw routes from the ferries to the boroughs. And I think that's awesome because you're able to customize your route. And I think that makes sense. But it still has that pacing that pushes me away from it that the original one has, where the game is long. And if you're playing with a lot of players, it is simultaneous play, but one person can make the game just like drag so much. And it's just something that's like, yeah, I'll play literally any other roll and write, I think, over this one. But I think New York is something interesting that is exciting. And it's my preferred version for sure. I think New York's the best one. So that is On Tour, the new Paris in New York expansions. Woo! So that's it. Those are all of the new games from 2022 that we played. And wow, what a huge list. We've got some more stuff in. As mentioned before, I was on vacation. And so we have a couple of things that just arrived. And I don't think I'm going to have time to play all of them for sure. It's the 29th. So I don't have that much time to get them played. But we got another copy of Blood on the Clocktower in, and that's so that we can do the custom characters, and we can have 2 games running as well. And so we can make like our own custom copies using the included pieces. We also have a copy of Woodcraft, War of the Ring, the card game. Hoplomachus Victorum just came in. I'll be honest with you, that's probably the one I'm most excited to play. I just heard very good things about it. It's supposed to be like a Pokemon feeling where you're getting these constant new characters. And so we got Hoplomachus Victorum, the new Hoplomachus Remastered. Let me just check over here real quick. Green Team wins. Rage More, recommended from my friend Tia. And then another recommendation from my friend Dan over at Chairman of the Board. This is Splitter. So a very tiny, small card game that apparently is super good, super solid roll and write game. And lastly, Maskman, another recommendation from Dan. So yes, recommendations galore. Rage More from Tia over at Takaijo. And then, of course, Aeon Trespass Odyssey is over there as well. But the whole box is damaged, so I don't know how soon I'm going to get into that one. But I am quite excited. What do you think? What should I be playing first? I think it's going to be Victorum because that just looks amazing. I've heard nothing but good things about it, and I already know how to play the original Hoplomachus, so that should work in my favor, hopefully. Oh my gosh, the production on that one is insane. They have these alloy dice that came in this like a fancy looking collector's case. I threw away the case though, because let's be real, it's like the most annoying thing to take them in and out of that thing. And so I just put them in one of the regular Chip Theory cases. But wow, the production on that one is stellar. And it features like the new art and graphic design of Chip Theory games. So it looks super stunning. Woodcraft looks ridiculous because there's like all of these tiny little components for everything, but the game has that core wheel system from Praga, so I hope it's awesome. The one that I'm actually pretty dang excited to try is War of the Ring, the card game. It looks so good. You have these unique decks and you can play. Apparently there's a cooperative mode that you can play. I didn't know that. That's awesome. So that will probably get played quite a bit in the cooperative setting, but you have each character playing with their own unique faction deck from some of the tribes of either the free peoples of Middle Earth or the enemies, the Shadowlands or the Dunlandiers, and they have this stacked deck that's full of different characters, and it looks awesome. I can't wait to try that one. I think that's actually there's so many good things. So I'm excited. There's a bunch of neat stuff happening here, but I also, talking about those games earlier, Frostpunk and Perseverance, I want to play more of that. So we'll see. But thank you so much for being here and for watching. I appreciate taking the time. And for those of you that are interested in all those unique titles that I played here, you now know all of the games that we did play from 2022. If you're looking for any of the more detailed reviews on like the gameplay or things that I like specifically, or at different player counts, go take a look at our top 10 of the year list videos. There's a whole playlist of those with favorite games, favorite solo games, favorite art, and favorite expansions, as well as the new to me games. So things that didn't didn't release in 2022, but that I did get to play this year. There were some amazing games. Just to highlight a few, El Grande was one of the best games I played this year. Believe it or not, Spicy, that little tiny card game, we've played so much of that over break, and it's still consistently good and engaging. God, what a good game. What a great year. 2022 was awesome. What were your favorite games from 2022? I'm so curious. And what did you think of the games that I talked about here? But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.